Good morning. Happy Friday, February 12th. I hope everyone's enjoying the snow, at least if you're in the Pacific Northwest and are staying warm. So today we have a quick 30-minute session on aggregate measures. Let's move along here and get my screen working. For those that don't know me, my name is Chris Barker. I'm the results trainer from Mass Ingenuity. If you have any questions along the way, please send them to chat. You're all muted and your cameras are off. Like I said, our session will be short and fast. I have my coworker, Aaron Howard, who will be monitoring the chat. So if there's any questions along the way, he'll interrupt me and I can answer them on the fly. Or if not, I can follow up with an email after the session. Aaron, would you like to say hello so they can hear your voice?
Indeed. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I'm really excited about this. So, Chris, I'm going to learn some things too.
All right, great. So let's get started. Aggregate measures. I just want to call out a few background pieces here. It is an optional function, right, related to measures that you can take advantage of or not. We have two different types of accounts. We have our large enterprise accounts, and then we have a few of our chamber folks if you're on the Team Pro. So the aggregation is not active if you have a Team Pro account, but it can be activated. So if you stay on and learn about aggregate measures, if you are interested, we can go ahead and turn that functionality on for you. And aggregate measures, when you want to use them, you want to use them when you want to drill down and really understand an additional dimension on a measure. So before we go into the software, I'm going to make sure that we all understand some of the basics so we have a common vocabulary. So let's start with the definition. Aggregate, to collect or gather into a mass, okay, to amount to a sum. So we're taking that data and we're looking at it in an aggregation or a total. So let's talk about some examples, okay? An aggregate measurement is a model that contains a collection of measures together with their corresponding dimensions, okay? So when we think about total sales or the number of orders, okay, the dimensions are really the slicers of how you want to drill down into it. Something like total sales, you might want to look at the different products that add up for your total sales. Something like applications, if you're processing different types of applications, you want to add and drill down into that. You might want to look at the number of applications per teams, by area, region, customer. There's a lot of different ways that you can drill down into what they say the added dimensions of that aggregation. So for best practice, okay, we have different ways of looking at our aggregation, okay, and results. We have the sum, average, and median, okay. So for a best practice, let me scoot back in case, no, okay. For best practice, if your data contains any outliers, okay, you would want to use a median, okay. So just, you know, for those that maybe math was not your favorite subject, I want to just make sure we all understand what the options are for aggregation, okay. For a median, okay, you're looking at the most common way that the data came in. So I'm going to give you a concrete example compared to an average. So if your data set has some outliers, it's going to really impact the average value and it might not tell you the information that you want. So let's go through an example, okay, on that. Okay, so in our data set here, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 5, 6 responses, okay? The data that came in, right, was from 1 to 10. If I took an average of these responses, of these data points, right, you can see that the average is 4.66. if I wanted to understand what is the most common response of how people responded related to this data set, okay, if this was something related to satisfaction, we're really more in the 3 zone, okay, compared to 4. So you have to think about your data set and really what are you trying to understand related to it. Okay. So again, let's go through some examples. Results has the sum, average, and median. Okay, so related to customer service data, okay, when you would use an aggregation related to the sum, might be something like total number of calls received. Okay, you want to look at the complete volume that is coming into your team. You also might want to look at the average. So if one team is processing way more than the average, okay, you can look at the different fluctuations that are coming through related to your customer service and the number of phone calls coming in. You might also want to look at the satisfaction related to the people that are placing those, that are handling the phone calls. So if we do an average, right, we might have something like 60%, we have it and a satisfaction related to 60% satisfaction. But we might have a few that are dragging that number down. So looking at the satisfaction via a median might be more insightful for your team. So different ways of looking at the aggregation. Before we go into results, some setup tips. So when you're setting up your aggregation, I suggest you use the cloning function. The quickest way to get all your pieces set up. You can clone your measures across maps. You can also aggregate your measures across maps. So I'm going to go through that when we get in the software. So you clone all your measures, then we go ahead and we edit the parent measure to aggregate. So I'm going to create my parent, and then I'm going to create all my children through the cloning before I connect. That's the fastest way for you to do the setup. Wanted to call out, if you have a measure and you're collecting data on it, and then you want to convert it to an aggregate measure, you will lose your data because the data is coming through the children. So I wanted to call that out. You'll get a notice, you'll get a little warning sign that, you know, you have data. If you go ahead and do the aggregation, you will lose that data. So it's important to understand that. When we create the aggregation, there's an effective date. So perhaps you have this measure and you are adding children at different time points. You can set the date that the children measures enter the aggregation. There's also the option to end the aggregation of your children measures. I usually set mine up with no ending date because out of the gate, I don't know when I want to stop that. But if you did, you could set that up, but no need, no pressure to define that up front. Then some tips about loading in the data. How is loading the data in different for aggregation? So for an aggregate family, it has 2 steps. Is first, at the parent level, your measure owner for the parent needs to set an aggregation date. And what that means is, what date are we going to define to organize it? Where is it coming from? So if I have my 3 children and those measure owners, for whatever reason, have different recording dates, the parent needs to define what the reporting date is at the parent level. So they open up the aggregation date, and then all the children measures, there's a 2-step process there. They connect to an aggregation date, and then they input their data like they normally would. Okay, and we will walk through that. The final step then is just to add your data and do that optional comment. I'm going to show you some indicators. So as the data is coming in to the flowing up to the parent, you want to understand we have created a system so that it's easy to understand, have all the children entered in their data. So you'll see here in the top the open circle. So none of your children measures have entered their data. So at the parent level, you would have an open circle. Below that, you'll see that there's a little check mark in the circle. And that's an indicator to say that some of the children measures have their data in. And then the final step, once all the children have entered in their data, the circle becomes grayed in. So at a very quick look, you can understand without having to open up all the parent and the children, understand, is my data complete? The final thing that I will show you is on the chart view. So when you have an aggregate measure, you go into chart view. So here on the left is my parent chart. My children measures will show in a list below my parent chart. When I go into a child measure, it's the opposite. My parent measure shows above. And again, I can see that open circle to say that, oh, none of the data has been entered yet to the parent. And then my child chart shows below. I'm going to go ahead and move us over to results and walk us through all those aspects. We're first going to go through how to set up a measure, how to do the data inputs, and then I'll walk you through the indicators and show you those charts. So it all starts in setting up measures, and that is an admin or a power user function. So I'm going to go to my Manage Maps, and I'm going to scroll down to where I want my parent measure, my aggregate measure to live. And for today's training, I've gone ahead and set up a training map. I go into Edit, and I just like setting up a regular measure. Okay, I am going to do the add outcome measure, and I'm just going to call it training 01, TR01. I'm going to call this, I want to create an aggregate measure for employee engagement. I'm going to hit add like I normally would, and I go ahead and I do my edit. I have to set up the rest of this, and I can, percent satisfied. I would always want to define that. My data source is a survey. I'm going to say this is a quarterly measure. I'm going to assign it to myself. I'm going to have a backup for my data steward. I'm going to do obviously active. Again, I'm out of the gate, and I'm not going to define this as an aggregate because I want to use that cloning function. It's a good high. Okay, I want bars, and I'm going to save it, all the beginning setup information. Then I will set up my target. I would say set it for, I want 85% of my employees to indicate they're satisfied with their duties. I'm going to go ahead and then define my thresholds. I'll just keep it as that, and I hit add. So that parent measure is set up except for the aggregation. So now I need to set up my children measures. So I'm going to go back to my setup screen, and I'm going to use that cloning functionality because I want to do it quickly. So I'm going to do training 02 or 01.a, and possibly this is my, I'll say employee engagement HR for my HR team, and I'm going to do that cloning function. And I hit add, and I'm going to keep my measure owner and my data steward. So this is really, it's nice where the combination of the aggregations kind of and the cloning functionality is all coming together. So I quickly go here and I clone. So one of my children measures is now created. Let's do one more child measure. I'm going to say training 01.b, and this is employee engagement. And I'll say this is from my operations team. I do the cloning again to do rapid setup. I'll just say for fun, everything's the same. I do my cloning, find the measure, again, my parents here, and I hit clone. So now I have all three pieces of my aggregate family. I have my parent, and then I have the two drill downs. Now I can go ahead and do the final step of joining for the aggregation. Go back to the parent measure, hit edit, and I can scroll down to the aggregation. So for this one, since it's a percent satisfaction, somewhat doesn't really quite make sense. Average, do the average of the two teams and roll it up, or I could do the median. I'm going to go ahead and do average. Okay, and here's that little warning notification. If I had any values in this parent measure, it would be lost, because again, my data is coming from my children. So I don't have any data, and even if I did, I understand that I want this now to be a roll-up measure, an aggregation. Now, once I do that, I hit save, and you'll see once I hit saved, the aggregation average is here. I have a new dialog box here. So now I'm going to go look for my children measures and connect them to my parent. So I can go ahead and either search by the measure code. Okay, it comes up that way. I can also search by the actual measure name. Either way works. I go ahead and connect that HR1, and here's that effective date. I'm going to actually say it's really going to start on February 1st. I'm going to leave that expiration date empty, and I hit add. Now my one child is connected to the parent. Do the same for my other one. Okay, I searched on this time, I searched on the measure code. Click on operations. What's nice is that it assumes, it gives you a starting point. It assumed that effective date was the same as the first one, but if it was different, I could go ahead and change it. There's no problem with that. And then I hit add. So now my family, my aggregation is all ready for data. Aaron, any questions come through before I show them how to do data?
Chris, one just came in. I'll just read it to you on the fly here, okay? Do child measures need to be the same frequency as the aggregate measure? Can the frequency be different for each child measure?
We recommend that the frequency be the same. It's going to cause confusion of the family. So great question. It should really be the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and go walk through the steps of getting data in. So in this particular example, just so you can see on the screen, is that I made myself the measure owner for all three. But in reality, in your situation, most likely they're owned by three different measure owners. So it starts with the parent. The parent, so employee engagement, the total, would open it up, okay, and then they would see a different screen here. So instead of actually putting the data in, the only step they have is to add an aggregation date. And it's to organize the data coming from the children. So they simply go here and set February 1st and hit add. So now this opens the data to flow from the children. So you can see here under value, it's grayed out, and the circle is open to say none of the children have added data yet. So now if I was one of the measure owners for the child data, I go to open up one of the children measures, and you can see my screen looks a little bit different because this is an aggregation. So if I skip this step here, step 1, aggregate date, and simply come in here and put in my data, and I put my comments in and hit add, the data is only sitting with the child. It has not flowed up to the parent yet because you need to link it to the parent. So to do that, I would simply go to the aggregation date, February 1st, okay, and then I hit save. I like to have my parent and my children lined up, but it's okay if, you know, your measure owner for your child, if they really wanted to say, well, this is the date I received it, I'm going to put it in there, but it really connects to that date, that's fine. And that's why we have that field. But I always like to have things nice and tidy and just have the same cadence across all of the members of my family. So that's step 1. Now I'm going to go back and take a look, and you can see now that that data, 60, has flowed up to my parent measure. And when I hover over the little indicator that says some of my data has been entered, but not all. So let's do the last one. Open the operations measure up, and I go through the same steps. So 2-1, go in and put my date recorded, and I put 80, and I enter in my comments, hit add, and I am done. Go back and take a look, and you can see now how it has flowed up to the parent measure. When I look at the indicator, it says all the children measures have been added. Okay, you can do the math. 60 divided, 60 plus 80 flows up to 70. Now let's talk about what if the parent forgot. They're behind, maybe they're out of the office, but my children have their data ready. So this was quarterly. We set this at quarterly, so it's already, the system's already helping me figure out when my next data point is due. There's nothing to link to, so I can go ahead and get my data in, comments, and hit add. So it's there, but it won't link until, I can't link it until my parent does their responsibility. So sometimes your parent measure might need a little help to say, hey, let's go ahead and open up the next aggregation date. So that's fine. They go ahead and do that. Now, the only thing is now this HR owner for employee engagement, they would just have to go back, whoops, sorry, and actually add the indicator there. So now it will show after the fact. So the timing, it's flexible. If the measure owner for the children, they have their data ready, they're ready to go, they can enter it in, and then after the fact, you can link it. So that doesn't cause any problems with the system. And they simply update it and hit save. So it's super easy to navigate. So let's now go back and take a look. Okay, you can see the different indicators here. So if I have an additional aggregate measure here called service performance, this isn't grayed out because they've opened the aggregation date, but no data from the children has been recorded. So I see two things. I see the open indicator and I see the threshold is set as gray because there's no data there yet to define against my thresholds. Down below under my employee engagement, I see if I hover over there that some of my children have their data in, but not all. Okay. And now if I want to do my final step and flip it, go back, say 45, hit add, and do my data. Right, so now it's in there. So we really saw all three. We saw the open circle. Once one piece of your children gets in, you'll see just a check mark. And then when all the family gets their data in, it is now shaded in. So now let's talk about when we go into chart view. So when I go into chart view here, I'm gonna go down, okay? I can see my service performance. This is an aggregation. So in the small chart view, they all look the same. When I go into my large chart view though, we help you out by going in and we show you the components. So I'm in my large chart view, I'm in my parent measure here, see my parent chart here, and then below are all my children measures here. So you can see, right, how they all rolled up. We're red. My last data point is red here, but really one of our children measures, they're actually on track here and they're in the green. So right from this screen, I could go right into the chart to my child measure. So let's do that. When I go to my child measure, okay, I see that parent linkage. Okay, so that's up on top. My child measure chart is below. I also see though an indicator for myself as the measure owner of this child, right? I see that the parent measure, they must have opened another reporting period because it's in the gray and I see that open circle. So again, if I'm the measure owner here, oh, that's my indicator, I need to go ahead and get some data in, then I'm not caught up. So those are the ways that we help support you get your data in, understand what data is there for you to help manage your aggregation. I'm going to go ahead and Erin, any additional questions flow through yet?
Nothing at this time, Chris.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, you can see that the aggregation is very easy to navigate once you understand all this stuff. We looked at aggregation on the setup, right, taking advantage of the cloning functionality, understanding that your data inputting has really two steps. One is to set up that aggregation date and then connect to that. And then the third thing is how to manage and look for, is all my data in for my aggregations, looking for the indicators, understanding the difference on that large chart view. And then my final note here is that in addition to this training webinar, which will be posted on our website in Milo as well, we also have a couple short 4-minute videos for anyone that wants to do a little follow-up and do a deeper dive. We have within Milo, we have 2 training videos called Creating Aggregate Measures and Inputting Data for Aggregate Measures. So if there's some questions or follow-up, please encourage you to take a look at that as well. And that's all I have for you today. So really appreciate the time. Again, you'll get this training webinar emailed out to you. And if you have any additional topics you would like me to cover, please don't hesitate to answer our 3 little questions there, and we can get that on the docket in the future. Thank you all. And if you all have Monday off, please enjoy your long weekend. Thank you.